I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are
Okay,
there
so
to...
say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please. Yes or no?
As I've said time and time again...
Imagine the heavy silence of a packed Senate hearing room, broken by a single razor-sharp challenge. Be a man. List it out. Senator Elissa Slotkin leans forward, eyes locked on America's new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Behind her words, a terrifying question that could change the future of this country forever. Has the U.S. military just been turned into a domestic police force? For the first time since 1965, thousands of troops have stormed the streets of Los Angeles without the governor's permission. Protesters, arrests, the sacred line between military and civilians, is it being erased? What you're about to witness is not just another political fight. It's the moment America stares into the mirror and asks, how far are we willing to go?
Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs, you said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
One question asked over and over by members of both parties. Did you authorize the military to detain American citizens on American soil? The Secretary of Defense of the United States sat in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he never answered it, not once, not directly, not with a yes, not with a no. Every time a senator tried to pin it down, he moved the frame, changed the subject, talked about concrete throwing and law enforcement support and the previous administration. But Senator Elissa Slotkin had done her homework. She knew exactly what question she was asking and exactly why it mattered. And when Hegseth laughed at her question about ordering troops to shoot unarmed protesters, she stopped him. "Don't laugh," she said. And then she told him something about his own predecessor that he could not explain away. Something that came from a book written by a Republican, appointed by the same president Hegseth now serves, except for the Bible, Hegseth said. That answer told you everything.
So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing. Authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man. List it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual. Did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so
to
say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job, deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration.
So they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As we've stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, They could temporarily
Okay.
detain and
Have
hand
you-
over to ICE, but
have
there's no
you given-
arresting going
have
on.
you-
And you know this better than
You're
you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues
What is
across
that
the
based
aisle.
on? What evidence would you
It
have
is
that an
based
order
on
like that
Donald
has ever
Trump
been given?
giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So you're poo-pooing of this. It just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh, my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a cat fight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
Trump deployed thousands of National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles. Despite objections from California Governor Gavin Newsom, police officers used rubber bullets and other less lethal tactics to quell protests, and an Australian reporter was shot in the leg with a rubber bullet on live television. The Hill Trump became the first commander-in-chief since 1965 to send National Guard troops to a state without cooperation from its governor. The Detroit News since 1965. That is not a small historical footnote. The domestic use of military force in the United States is governed by a legal framework called the Posse Comitatus Act, which severely restricts the military from performing law enforcement functions on American soil. The Insurrection Act provides an exception, allowing presidents to deploy troops domestically under specific circumstances. But even within that framework, coordination with governors has been the consistent practice for 60 years. Trump broke that practice. He sent troops to Los Angeles over the governor's explicit objection. 4,700 troops, active military and National Guard, into an American city to operate alongside federal immigration enforcement during civilian protests. And when the Senate Armed Services Committee convened to exercise oversight over that deployment, they could not get a straight answer about what those troops were authorized to do. The first exchanges in the hearing set the temperature before Slotkin even took the floor. A congressman asked Hegseth a yes or no question about whether political allegiance to Trump was a requirement for serving in the department. Hegseth called it a silly question. The congressman said it was silly enough to warrant a very straightforward answer. Hegseth kept talking. The congressman ran out of patience. He told Hegseth he was an embarrassment to the country, unfit to lead, that bipartisan members of Congress had called for his resignation, that he should get the hell out and let someone competently lead the department. That is where the hearing started. Then Senator Desjardins from Tennessee, a Republican, raised the deployment directly. He acknowledged that during Hegseth's confirmation hearing, Hegseth had called the question of deploying troops against protesters theoretical. Now it was not theoretical. 4,700 troops were in Los Angeles. The governor had not consented. It was the first time since 1965 that it happened. Desjardins asked Hegseth whether he had authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles. Hegseth said it was sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation was out there. He said the troops were there to protect law enforcement. Desjardins pushed. That is not the question. The question is about authority, not purpose. Authority. Did you give them the ability to detain or arrest? Yes or no? Hegseth kept talking about law enforcement support and deportation. That pattern, that specific pattern of answering a different question confidently enough that the original question gets buried in the noise. That is what Slotkin saw coming, and that is what she had prepared for. She pressed on whether Hegseth authorized the military to detain or arrest protesters. The Detroit News, he started to answer. He said, he said, it's sort of. He stopped. Be a man, Slotkin said. List it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest Everett Post? That phrase, be a man, landed in a specific way in that room, because Slotkin was not speaking from inexperience. She served 3 tours in Iraq as a CIA analyst. Yahoo! She has worked inside the national security apparatus. She understands command authority. She understands what it means when a Secretary of Defense cannot give a direct answer about what orders he has issued to uniformed troops deployed on American soil. Hegseth ultimately said that members of the military acting in self-defense could temporarily detain and hand over protesters to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The Hill. That is a partial admission, and it matters specifically because it confirms that detention authority exists in some form. The question was never whether the authority exists at all. The question is about scope, about trigger conditions, about who authorized it and under what legal framework. None of that was clarified, but Hegseth confirmed that in some circumstances, the uniformed military can detain American citizens participating in protests and hand them to federal immigration enforcement. Slotkin then asked about cyber tools. Had Hegseth authorized military cyber tools to investigate people participating in protests? Hegseth said certainly in no way that he would be aware of. PBS Slotkin said she loved that answer, because that answer is not no. That answer is, I am not aware of it happening, which is a different thing. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when asked directly whether the military was incorporating domestic law enforcement expansion into its planning, gave an answer that amounted to he was not aware of it at his level, but could not speak to what others below him might be doing. The top uniformed officer in the United States military, not aware of what his own organization might be doing regarding the domestic use of military cyber tools against American protesters. That answer is either genuinely alarming or deliberately evasive. There is no version of it that is reassuring. Then came the lethal force question. Have you given the order for troops to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? Slotkin asked. Hegseth apparently laughed. Yahoo! Don't laugh, Slotkin warned. Yahoo! The question was not absurd. The question was grounded in documented history, specifically in a memoir written by Hegseth's own Republican predecessor. In his 2022 memoir, Esper wrote that in a surreal moment in June 2020, Trump had asked him if he could have the military shoot protesters. Can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something? Trump reportedly asked Esper. Yahoo! That is not a rumor. That is not opposition research. That is a first-hand account written by a Republican Secretary of Defense appointed by Donald Trump describing a request made to him by Donald Trump about shooting American protesters in the legs. Hegseth asked what evidence Slotkin had that such an order had ever been given. Slotkin responded that it was based on Donald Trump giving that order to his predecessor, a Republican Secretary of Defense, who she gave a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. The Hill. He had more guts and balls than you, Slotkin said, because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this just shows you don't understand who we are as a country. Yahoo! Hegseth's response to a first-hand memoir account from his own predecessor, appointed by the same president he now serves, was to dismiss books as unreliable sources. Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, Hegseth said, except for the Bible. Yahoo! Oh my God, a visibly frustrated Slotkin replied. Yahoo! The except for the Bible line is not a throwaway, it is a signal. When a Secretary of Defense responds to a documented first-hand account from a fellow Republican cabinet official by questioning the reliability of books and then carving out the Bible as the exception, he is communicating something specific to a specific audience. He is saying that evidence and documentation operate on different rules for him, that primary sources are subject to his personal credibility assessment, that the standards of accountability that apply to most institutions do not apply here. And that should concern anyone who believes that oversight requires a shared standard of truth. The memoir was written by a man who was there, who described a conversation he personally participated in, who warned at the time that he stayed in the administration specifically because he feared what Trump would do if he left. During his January confirmation hearing, Hegseth would not rule out shooting protesters if Trump ordered it. One of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never, in this public forum, give one way or another what orders the president gives to me in any context, Hegseth said at the time. The Hill. So at his confirmation hearing, Hegseth would not rule it out. At this hearing, months later, with troops deployed in Los Angeles, he would not confirm or deny the authority exists to use lethal force. He would not answer the direct question. And when pressed on the documented historical precedent for that question existing at all, he dismissed the documentation. The question Slotkin was asking was not political theater. It was the foundational question of constitutional governance. The American military exists to defend the country from external threats. The domestic law enforcement function is deliberately separated from the military function by law and by design. When the line between those two things blurs, when troops are deployed in American cities with uncertain authority over American citizens with questions about detention and lethal force going unanswered in congressional oversight hearings, the question is not whether to be concerned. The question is what the oversight system is supposed to do about it when the Secretary of Defense simply will not answer. Hegseth also suggested during the hearing that he might ignore court orders regarding the domestic use of troops. He said he did not believe district courts should be setting national security policy. When asked whether he would follow a Supreme Court ruling, he said, "If it goes to the Supreme Court, we'll see. MS now. We'll see." Whether he would follow a Supreme Court order to remove troops from American city streets. Slotkin closed her questioning by asking about day-after planning for Iran. Had Hegseth commissioned any analysis of what comes after the military objectives are met? Troop presence, ground forces, cost assessments. The lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, where the military phase was successful and the aftermath was catastrophic, are not ancient history. Hegseth said they have plans for everything. That is not an answer to the question either. The same pattern. A different question answered confidently. The original question buried in the noise. Senator Slotkin asked whether the Secretary of Defense had authorized troops to detain American citizens. She asked whether lethal force had been authorized against unarmed protesters. She cited a Republican predecessor's documented account of being asked to do exactly that. She got the Bible.